and welcome to the final chapter of our discussion and analysis of Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. So thank you. If you listen to every video, well done. Thank you very much. I appreciate it very much. And there's actually loads of things that are useful in this chapter. There's absolutely tons of, as you'd imagine really, tons of really important things happen. So after this, look out for new videos as well. And I'll probably take a little bit of a break. And yeah, look out for some more. Anyway, but thank you. Without waffling on anymore, let's get into the actual final chapter itself. So into chapter 34. Oh, it's exciting. It's the final chapter. Anyway, we have Heathcliff hasn't been eating. There's something very strange going on with Heathcliff. He's not his normal self. And we've said before, this is about really, he's consumed with grief. Eating once in 24 hours seems sufficient sustenance for him. This actually declines even further. He doesn't even do that. So he's not eating. He just can't eat. He can't rest. He's perpetually disturbed. And he's overcome with grief. You could argue maybe there's a supernatural element to it. He's now being haunted by Catherine as he wished. Maybe. But even if it's not a supernatural thing, it's still a form of haunting in a figurative way, in that she's dominating his mind all the time. So that is a kind of a haunting, whether it's supernatural or not. Maybe it doesn't really matter whether it's supernatural or not, because the effect is the same. One night after the family were in bed, I heard him go downstairs and out the front door. So he goes off along the moors. He's out in the moors all the time. The weather was sweet and warm, the grass as green as shells and sun could make it, and the two dwarf apple trees near the southern wall in full bloom. So you've got this, again, the symbolism of nature, and the two dwarf apple trees probably, as they're in full bloom, probably represent Hareton and Catherine as well. Young Catherine, in their blossoming relationship. So she would say, Catherine insisted on my bringing a chair and sitting with my work under the fir trees at the end of the house, and she beguiled Hareton. It's an interesting verb choice of beguiled, as if she's sort of controlling him with her feminine wiles, who had perfectly recovered from his accident, at least what Nelly means anyway, who had perfectly recovered from his accident to dig and arrange her little garden, which was shifted that corner by the influence of Joseph's complaints. So remember before in the last chapter they dug up Joseph's bushes, blackcurrant and gooseberries, I believe, off the top of my head. And it's like elements of Thrushcross Grange coming up to Wuthering Heights, so a civilising quality coming through here as well. But then also Bronte's doing it because it shows how Hareton is so easily now manipulated by Catherine. And I say manipulated, I don't think she's necessarily doing it in a malicious way. It's just how their relationship works. That's what's going on. Then we have a reference to primroses, which as a flower symbolise youth and also optimism as well. So again, Bronte's linking nature with Hareton and young Cathy's relationship as well. So Catherine also says that Heathcliff was coming in. He spoke to me, she added with a perplexed countenance. What did he say? He told me to be gone as fast as I could, she answered, but he looked so different from his usual look that I stopped a moment to stare at him. How, he inquired. Why, almost bright and cheerful. No, almost nothing. Very much excited and wild and glad, which is almost nothing. So, well, not actually almost. He was really, really excited, wild and glad. Night walking amuses him then, I remarked, affecting a careless manner. But so even his behaviour, his countenance, he's so typically, isn't he, surly, angry, violent. But here, for the first time really since he was a child, this idea of him being bright and cheerful, the idea of when he's bright and cheerful really, I suppose, with Catherine, he was at his happiest with the former Catherine, and when he was on the moors with her playing. But he's really strange, he's almost elated. So really this represents a shift, and it's foreshadowing to him finding his own personal peace, isn't it, really? Like through his, you know where he's going with this. We already know, we've already been told, this isn't a spoiler, We know Heathcliff's going to die. We've already been told that he's been dead. If you watch the other videos, you know we've been told already that he's dead. We're just finding out as a flashback here. Heathcliff stood at the open door. He was pale and he trembled, yet certainly he had a strange joyful glitter in his eyes that altered the aspect of his whole face. So he actually looks happy, and it makes him look different. "We have some breakfast?" "No, I'm not hungry," he answered, averting his head and speaking rather contemptuously, as if he guessed I was trying to divine the occasion of his good humour. So he knows Nelly's kind of trying to find out what's going on. "I've neither cold nor fever, Nelly," he remarked in allusion to my morning speech, "and I'm ready to do justice to the food you'll give me." He took his knife and fork and was going to commence eating when the inclination appeared to become suddenly extinct. So it's like he's forgetting to live. Bronte presents it as it's like he's forgetting to live. He can't eat. He's forgetting how to eat, effectively. So then he gets up off the table. He doesn't actually. We saw him walking to and fro in the garden while we concluded our meal. And Earnshaw, as Hareton, said he'd go and ask why he would not dine. He thought he had grieved him in some way. So it's not that. He's not angry. He seemed really pleased indeed, only I made him impatient by speaking to him twice, and then he bid me be off to you. He wondered how I could want the company of anybody else. So it was unnatural appearance of joy, this is describing Heathcliff, under his black brows, the same bloodless hue and his teeth visible, and then in a kind of smile, his frame shivering, not as one shivers with chill or weakness, but as a tight-stretched cord vibrates, a strong thrilling rather than trembling. So there's a real kind of vampiric quality to him. There's an otherworldliness about how Heathcliff is presented. He doesn't seem to be attached to reality in many ways. His responses, the way he's behaving, he seems to be completely removed from that. "Have you heard any good news, Mr. Heathcliff? You look uncommonly animated." "Where should good news come from to me?" he said. "I'm animated with hunger, and seemingly I must not eat." "Your dinner is here," I returned. "Why don't you get it?" That's Nelly. "I don't want it now," he muttered hastily. "I'll wait till supper." So he basically keeps deferring each meal. He keeps kind of knocking it further down the line, really, and just never actually getting to it. "And Nelly, once for all, let me beg you to warn Hareton and the other away from me." Note there that he can't bring himself to name Catherine. He doesn't want to say this is young Catherine, but of course if he says young Catherine's name, he's also saying the Catherine, same name as the person he loves. So that's painful for him. "Then tell me why you're so queer, Mr. Heathcliff. Where were you last night? I'm putting the question through idle curiosity, but..." "You are putting the question through very idle curiosity," he interrupted with a laugh. "Ho, ho, ho. Yet I'll answer it. Last night I was on the threshold of hell." So we've had lots of hell imagery, haven't we? "Today I'm within sight of my heaven." So this is antithesis as well. "I have my eyes on it, hardly 3 feet to sever me." Now that was making me think, as a context point, it's only really in more recent times, and I think from kind of late Victorian era, I might be wrong with the exact dating of it, but people, when they died, would be buried in churchyards 6 feet under. Is actually more recent. Historically, people were only buried 3 feet under, and considering the setting of this, I think the numbers might add up. Actually, in a rural setting like this, considering that Heathcliff, and with the sexton and everything, and digging the grave and everything for Catherine, and 3 feet would be more reasonable within that time frame, wouldn't it, rather than 6 foot? So that's why he means, "Today I'm within sight of my heaven, I have my eyes on it, hardly 3 feet to sever me." So he's talking about his connection to Catherine there. I might be wrong on the exact dates, but I definitely know at least in the 1700s, most churches would bury people about 3 feet rather than 6 foot. That was a more recent innovation. And then, so that seems to fit, doesn't it, I think? So I've just suddenly had to pause it and highlight this, actually, because I meant to talk about this and thought, well, that's weird. And I couldn't remember where this sequence was, so as I was reading, I thought, oh yeah, there it is. So I'm sorry that this has suddenly just appeared. But he did not quit the house again that afternoon, and no one intruded on his solitude till at 8 o'clock. I deemed it proper, though unsummoned, to carry a candle and his supper to him. So this is very reminiscent of Lockwood's supernatural encounter with the ghost of Catherine in the way that he was taken upstairs, candlelight up to the forbidden room. It's a similar situation here because Heathcliff is described as leaning against the ledge of an open lattice but not looking out. His face was turned to the interior gloom. The fire had smouldered to ashes. The room was filled with the damp, mild air of the cloudy evening, and so still that not only the murmur of the beck down Gimmerton was distinguishable, but its ripples and its gurgling is a really nice onomatopoeia here as well, over the pebbles or through the large stones which could not cover. So Heathcliff is standing there with the window open, and this is the motif of windows where Heathcliff is connecting with nature there. So it's the sound of the water, it's the temperature, it's all the sounds of nature, the damp and everything. The water he's connected to the nature, he's connected to nature. So he's behaving very strangely. Again, in a sort of supernatural sense, I think, and definitely not a normal human way. I'm not saying he's not human, but you get what I mean. He's acting in a very, very peculiar way. He's doing strange things, and a lot of it is connected to nature. And of course, this is the connection to Catherine. So the light flashed on his features as I spoke. Oh, Mr. Lockwood, I cannot express what a terrible start I got by the momentary view. Those deep black eyes, that smile and ghastly paleness. It appeared to me not Mr. Heathcliff, but a goblin. And in my terror, I let the candle bend towards the wall and it left me in darkness. So he looks so weird and scary. He looks like a monster. He looks like a goblin. So he's an evil spirit of some kind. That's what he looks. So the candle ends up going out because she was in a hurried out in a foolish state of dread. So because of her reading, Nelly is actually quite rational, but because of her background and upbringing, she's sort of socialised really into thinking about the supernatural because of the era. But she's self-educated, so she sees things a bit more rationally, but she can't help but slip into the irrationality of her class and her upbringing, if you see what I mean. Then she just says Joseph to go in there as well. Joseph rattled some fire into the shovel and went, but he brought it back immediately with the supper tray in his other hand, explaining that Mr. Heathcliff was going to bed and he wanted nothing to eat till morning. So no more food. Is he a ghoul or a vampire? Continuing this supernatural motif. I had read of such hideous incarnate demons. So again, this is Nelly, self-educated. She's gone through the Thrushcross Grange library, so she knows about ghouls and vampires. I'll just plug, if you finish this video and you're interested, I've got my Dracula analysis as well when I go through all of Dracula. So if you want to know about vampires, I'm just going to plug that playlist. It's also on my channel if you want to go through the whole thing. Dracula's really good. I really like Dracula. Anyway, I digress. Then we have attended him in infancy and watched him grow to youth. So we've said before about Nelly's maternal qualities, and followed him almost through his whole course, and what absurd nonsense it was to yield to that sense of horror. So she knows rationally he can't be a ghoul or a vampire because she's effectively brought him up. So she's seen him grow from a child to an adult, so she knows he's not supernatural really. But look at this is so good. But where did he come from, the little dark thing, harboured by a good man to his bane, muttered Superstition. So Superstition, Bronte personifies there, and that's Nelly's own kind of inner conflict between her traditional rural upbringing and superstitions versus her rational self-education. And I suppose really, again, it's like the Wuthering Heights world versus the Thrushcross Grange world. You can't really imagine ghosts at Thrushcross Grange, but you can imagine ghosts at Wuthering Heights. So Nelly in some ways represents, she's a kind of transitional character between those two worlds of Thrushcross Grange and Wuthering Heights, isn't she? So we have, then as she's kind of disturbed there, she thinks, all I can remember is being exceedingly vexed and having the task of dictating an inscription for his monument. She was thinking if he is kind of approaching death, then she suddenly thought, oh, it's going to be a real faff, isn't it, with the, this is kind of irrational thought someone might have in this kind of situation. He hasn't got a surname, so he's just going to have Heathcliff. They don't know how old he is, so that's all his gravestone's going to have. And she says, actually, that came true. So if you go to the churchyard, the kirkyard, you'll read on his headstone only that and the date of his death. So Dawn restored to me common sense as well. So we said about that in Nelly between the rational view and the irrational view, the superstitious view as well. Then we have, I put a basin of coffee. I like to imagine that's just a cup of coffee, but imagine drinking who he really wants his coffee. I'll have it in a basin, please. It's not as big as that. That's just how words have changed over time. But I like to imagine him glugging coffee from a basin, but he doesn't want anything to eat or drink anyway, so he's not going to have it as it is. Then he drew it nearer and then rested his arms on the table and looked at the opposite wall, as I suppose, surveying one particular portion up and down with glittering, restless eyes, with such eager interest that he stopped breathing during half a minute together. So again, it's like he's forgetting to live. He stopped breathing. He's not eating. He's not drinking. He's not breathing. So Bronte is actually building up. There is a sense of incrementum here as we approach Heathcliff's death. He's getting stranger and stranger, and he's getting to the point where he's forgetting to do basic functions, basic human functions. He didn't notice me, and yet he smiled. I'd rather have seen him gnash his teeth than smile so. Smiling is so strange for Heathcliff as well, but he's smiling in a weird way. Mr. Heathcliff, master, I cried, don't for God's sake stare as if you saw an unearthly vision. Don't for God's sake shout so loud, he replied. Turn round and tell me, are we by ourselves? Of course, was my answer. Of course, so this is all. There's all implication here of Heathcliff is either having a vision of Catherine in his own state of hunger. He's maybe getting to the point where he's actually hallucinating, or there's a supernatural side to it. So again, Bronte's allowing you to go down the Thrushell's Grange rationality view or the Wuthering Heights superstition view. Now I perceived he was not looking at the wall, for when I regarded him alone, it seemed exactly that he gazed at something within 2 yards distance. Now, 2 yards distance, well, that's not too different to the 3 feet he was talking about. Obviously, the distance isn't the same, but 2 yards, that's... So you have really, whatever he's seeing, and it's probably the ghost of Catherine, or a vision of Catherine, is effectively 6 feet away from her. He says she was 3 feet, so there's a sense of maybe now she's getting closer and closer to him. I know that sounds reverse, but if you think about it, if she's 3 feet and she's away, and he meant originally kind of the idea of her being buried underground, and that's how close he is to her. But now he's seeing a vision of her and she's 6 feet away, but actually, really, this is because she's now out of the grave and she's coming to him. Well, her spirit's kind of out of the grave coming to him. So this is really heightened romance as well. It's gothic romance. This is that the novel's been all along. It's a gothic romance. Then, and whatever it was, it communicated apparently both pleasure and pain in exquisite extremes. So there's a paradox here. There's antithesis, pleasure and pain. So this suggests that he's having a vision of Catherine here as well. If he stretched his hand out to get a piece of bread, his fingers clenched before they reached it and remained on the table, forgetful of their aim. So this personification there as well. He's forgetting he can't even feed himself. And now it's getting to the point where he's not been eating, he's not been sleeping, he's not drinking, he's forgetting to breathe. And now it's like he's actually even forgetting like basic motor skills of even like being able to pick up the bread. He's so distracted and overcome with a vision or whatever he's visualising, which we all think we know what it is, don't we? Again, we said Bronte is building up. There's incrementum here. He's getting more and more extreme. His grief is, it's obviously a really mental thing, but it's having a physical effect on him. And just to check, oh yeah, his words were that, yeah, don't worry about, just put his food down. So this is all obviously very unusual behaviour from Heathcliff as well, who's obviously been a very physical person as well. Having uttered these words, he left the house, slowly sauntered down the garden path and disappeared through the... If he feels like eating it, he'll have it, but he won't, obviously. He returned after midnight. Instead of going to bed, shut himself into the room beneath. I distinguished Mr. Heathcliff's step, restlessly measuring the floor, and he frequently broke the silence by a deep inspiration resembling a groan. So again, this actually recalls when he was grieving when Catherine first died as well. I say first died. Oh, well, I meant to say the first Catherine died. Yes, okay, that makes more sense. I apologise. The only one I could catch was the name of Catherine, coupled with some wild term of endearment or suffering, and spoken as one would speak to a person present, low and earnest and wrung from the depth of his soul. So this is very spiritual. It's been presented almost as a supernatural thing, or at least it's some form of delusion or hallucination for Heathcliff as well. But Bronte deliberately leaves this open to your own interpretation. So what do you think? You can think of it yourself. So then, Nelly, come here. Is it morning? Come in with your light. It's striking 4, I answered. Do you want a candle to take upstairs? You might have lit one at this fire. No, I don't wish to go upstairs. So he's acting, he's very peculiar. He doesn't want to go to bed. He can't sleep. When day breaks, I'll send for Green, he said. I wish to make some legal inquiries of him while I can bestow a thought on those matters, and while I can act calmly. I have not written my will yet, and how to leave my property I cannot determine. I wish I could annihilate it from the face of the earth. Because Heathcliff had been, I've always joked, haven't I, about Gimmerton monopoly. He's been enacting his revenge, acquiring property and punishing people through really his own kind of accumulation of wealth. He's manipulated things, so he's ended up owning Thrushcross Grange, he owns Wuthering Heights, he owns all the land associated with those properties. So he's a very wealthy man, but of course he's been violent, aggressive, cruel. And what's he done really? He hasn't got anything. He knows he's going to die. That's why he's not quite worked this out yet. What's he going to do about his property? Well, who's he going to leave it to? That's why he says, I wish I can annihilate it from the face of the earth. He just wishes it's something that he could just not have and not worry about. And to me, again, this is the idea, I think, of detaching himself from his physical possessions. I think Bronte's doing this because it's an idea of him detaching himself from his own physical being as well. So he wants to really just evaporate into the spirit world and be with Catherine. I think that's what that's implying. I would not talk so, Mr. Heath, if I interposed. Let your will be a while. You'll be spared to repent of your many injustices yet. So often we've talked about the novel, and when you get the context about the novel and Emily Bronte's background, and she, despite being the daughter of a clergyman, her own experiences made her very kind of cynical about the established church and Christianity in general. But I think some ways here you can look at it as, particularly here with Nelly, unless Bronte's just playing, I say lip service, but it's not spoken to, written service to it, like conventional Christianity of the era, which I don't think she is. But you have Nelly here really saying, you've actually, it's not too late for you to repent for your sins. And this is like very Christian ideas of forgiveness. Like Heathcliff, it's not too late. He's not dead. He can repent for all the terrible things he's done, and he can actually go to heaven. This is like Nelly's idea. Almost entirely your own fault, and the way you've passed these 3 days might knock up a Titan. So he's so strong and physical that a Titan, as in the, so thinking of Greek mythology, and they were like the precursor gods to the Olympian gods, the Titans. So the idea of what Heathcliff's managed to endure has been titanic, as in huge, colossal. You need only to look yourself in a glass, as in that's a mirror, see how you require both, so he needs food and rest. Your cheeks are hollow and your eyes bloodshot, like a person starving with hunger and going blind with loss of sleep. It is not my fault that I cannot eat or rest. So we also have a paradox here. Then, as to repenting of my injustices, so I should do the voice. As to repenting of my injustices, I've done no injustice, and I repent of nothing. So Heathcliff isn't going to have a kind of Christian turnaround and a revelation at the end and realise what he's done. I'm too happy, and yet I'm not happy enough. That's a paradox. My soul's bliss kills my body, but does not satisfy itself. So Heathcliff's own existence is like a paradox at the moment. He's effectively eating himself up. Then, you are aware, Mr. Heathcliff, I said, that from the time you were 13 years old, you have lived a selfish, unchristian life and probably hardly had a Bible in your hands during all that period. You must have forgotten the contents of the book, and you may not have space to search it now. Could it be hurtful to send for someone, some minister of any denomination, it does not matter which, to explain it and show how very far you have erred from its precepts and how unfit you will be for its heaven, unless a change takes place before you die. So any denomination of Christianity, like someone to come up, any clergyman to come up and to help you really pass into the afterlife in peace. "I'm rather obliged and angry, Nelly," he said, "for you remind me of the manner in which I desire to be buried. It is to be carried to the churchyard in the evening. You and Hareton may, if you please, accompany me, and mind particularly to notice that the sexton obeys my directions concerning the 2 coffins." So, could notice he doesn't care if Catherine's there, but Hareton and Nelly, these are the 2 people he's probably been closest to in his life in many ways. "No minister need come, nor need anything to be said over me. I'll tell you I've nearly attained my heaven, and that of others is altogether unvalued and uncoveted by me." So this is really good stuff here. So if you're exploring ideas about religion and unconventional responses to Christianity and that kind of pagan idea of a spiritual bond to the earth and the land, and Heathcliff isn't interested in any denomination of Christianities or any religion, I would expect as well, any religious view of afterlife. He doesn't care about that. What matters to him, obviously we're going to mention Bronte's creating, or this Bronte is creating this, she's establishing this, that Heathcliff, his idea of heaven is all that matters to him, and his idea of heaven is to be with Catherine in the earth, and that's why he wants the coffin to be manipulated in that way. Remember, we've had that earlier on, and to be with her in the grave and to shove the Edgar Linton coffin out of the way and make sure he's with Catherine there with the sides open. So that's what he's after there. So I've highlighted that he retired to his den because that's more animal imagery, isn't there? "I believe you think me a fiend," he said with his dismal laugh. "Something too horrible to live under a decent roof." So the idea, again, that's more devil imagery there as well. Then turning to Catherine, he was there, and he drew behind me at this approach. He added half sneeringly, "Will you come, Chuck? I'll not hurt you. No, to you I've made myself worse than the devil. Well, there is one who won't shrink from my company. By God, she's relentless. Oh, damn it, it's unutterably too much for flesh and blood to bear, even mine." So he is talking there. This is really, the inference is, it's Catherine, isn't it? There is one who won't shrink from my company. She's the only person who will really be with him all the time. And he did, this is what he asked for. He did say, "Haunt me," didn't he? He did say that. This is what he's, effectively his wish. Whether it is supernatural or not, again, is up to you. Heathcliff bid us be damned, so that's more how Alexis there as well. He was better and would be left alone so the doctor went away. So they sent up for a doctor for him. He doesn't want that. Following evening was very wet. Indeed, it poured down till day dawn. So pathetic fallacy here. As I took my morning walk round the house, I observed the master's window swinging open and the rain driving straight in. He cannot be in bed, I thought. Those showers would drench him through. He must either be up or out. Having succeeded in obtaining entrance with another key, I ran to unclose the panels, for the chamber was vacant, pushing them aside. So this actually, where Heathcliff is, it mirrors Lockwood's own experience, doesn't it, with Catherine and the window. And notice Heathcliff's got the window there. He's open to the elements. The rain's coming in, and look how Nelly finds him. Mr. Heathcliff was there, laid on his back. His eyes met mine so keen and fierce. I started, but then he seemed to smile. I could not think him dead, but his face and throat were washed with rain. The bedclothes dripped, and he was perfectly still. The lattice flapping to and fro would graze one hand that rested on the sill. No blood trickled from the broken skin, and I put my fingers to it. I could doubt no more. He was dead and stark. So Heathcliff has died there. So I often be referring to the Tom Hardy incarnation of Heathcliff and that version of it, but I don't want to say too much about it in case you haven't seen it, but I really don't like what they do at the end of that adaptation, and I don't want to ruin it if you haven't seen it, but it just doesn't work for me. This works so much better, I think, and this is so much more in the romantic tradition, and the way that Heathcliff dies here, it is out of overwhelming grief that manifests itself physically, and it's more torturous. It's over a longer period of time. So I think Heathcliff's Heathcliff's exit from the novel here is entirely appropriate for the character and the relationship he had with Catherine as well. So I think that's why I don't understand why anyone adapting it would really change this. It just doesn't make any sense to me to change that. So I combed his black long hair from his forehead. That is a deliberate reference, isn't it, or an anaphoric reference back to the where was it, chapter 4, isn't it? I think when Nelly is first combing his hair when he's been rescued from the streets and brought in by old Mr. Earnshaw. So she's there at effectively the start of his life at Wuthering Heights, and Bronte has it so he's here at the end of his life at Wuthering Heights. I tried to close his eyes to extinguish, if possible, that frightful lifelike gaze of exultation before anyone else beheld it. They would not shut. So this is almost supernatural in the way that you can't close his eyes. He can't be at peace in the traditional way, what you would do. They were not shut. They seemed to sneer at my attempts, and his parted lips and sharp white teeth sneered too. So this is metaphorical because he's dead, but again, it's got a supernatural quality to about it. The devil's hurried off his soul, this is Joseph's reaction. And he may have his carcass into bargain for aught I care. Ech, what a wicked un he looks, gurning at death. And the old sinner grinned in mockery. I thought he intended to cut a cape around the bed. That's a nice bit of hyperbole there from Bronte. The idea of Joseph being so happy. This puts me in the mind of Joseph dancing around like Grandpa Joe in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Has got the film version of that, the Willy Wonka film. It just reminds you of this miserable old man jumping up around the room, and he's happy that Heathcliff is dead. I don't think we'll have a song though. But that's what caper is, a dance, and I should have said that. That's why it makes me laugh. Just he doesn't do that. He doesn't really start singing or anything, but it's hyperbolic. It's Nelly imagining. Joseph seems so happy that that's what he might do, but it's hyperbolic. So, but I find it an amusing image to imagine that. Anyway, then suddenly composing himself, he fell on his knees and raised his hands and returned thanks that the lawful master and the ancient stock were restored to their rights. So what's happened here is because Heathcliff didn't get to write his will or change anything, Hareton is now the rightful owner of all the land. He's got everything. Hareton is now Mr. Moneybags of the area. He's got Thrushell's Grange, he's got all the land, he's got Wuthering Heights, he's got all the land, he's got everything. So I felt stunned by the awful event, and my memory unavoidably recurred to former times with a sort of oppressive sadness. But poor Hareton, the most wronged, was the only one who really suffered much. He sat by the corpse all night, weeping in bitter earnest. So Hareton's response, we know how close he was to Heathcliff, strangely, and it's a kind of illogical bond that he had to him, and he was obviously awful, but Hareton is genuinely grieving for him as well. He pressed its hand and kissed the sarcastic, savage face that everyone else shrank from contemplating. Mr. Kenneth, that's a doctor, was perplexed to pronounce of what disorder the master died, so Bronte deliberately makes ambiguity here about how he's died. She said, I conceal the fact of his having swallowed nothing for 4 days, so the sort of the forensic science of pathology and working out like a post-mortem for Heathcliff, it's not very precise. So Nelly just doesn't tell him that he hasn't been eating for days, and Kenneth, the doctor, can't work out, oh, he's looking a bit thin, he's not looking very well. Anyway, so he's not eating anything. I'm persuaded he did not abstain on purpose. It was the consequence of his strange illness, not the cause. Now, this is very interesting as well. So it's like she's saying that Heathcliff didn't really die because he wasn't eating. The not eating was a symptom of whatever was troubling him, and the thing that was troubling him is the thing that made him die. So it was more of a mental thing that really did it rather than the physical thing. The physical thing of not eating was a symptom of whatever was happening to him. So that's quite sophisticated, isn't it, really? And this is long before ideas about mental health was really understood. This is a long time before that. So it's perceptive from Bronte, and obviously as Nelly as a character, it's perceptive as well. We buried him to the scandal of the whole neighbourhood as he wished. Earnshaw and I, the sexton, and 6 men to carry the coffin. That was everybody. Hareton with a streaming face, so metaphor there, is really crying, dug green sods and laid them over the brown mould himself. And I hope its tenants sleep soundly. But the country folks, if you ask them, would swear on the Bible that he walks. Here's the supernatural for you here. There are those who speak to having met him near the church and on the moor, and even within this house. So it looks like he's living, well, I say living on, not living, but continuing on as a ghost. Idle tales you'll say, and so say I. That's Nelly's rational side coming through. Yet that old man by the kitchen fire affirms he has seen two of them looking out of his chamber window on every rainy night since his death. So that's Joseph has noticed, because Joseph ends up staying at the Heights actually. So he sees that. And an odd thing happened to me about a month ago. I was going to the Grange one evening, a dark evening, threatening thunder, personification, and just at the turn of the Heights I encountered a little boy with a sheep and two lambs before him. This is a very typical kind of romantic image of a little shepherd boy with the lambs. Two lambs as well. Two lambs signifying youth, maybe innocence as well, when echoing the innocent early days of Heathcliff and Catherine. I might be going too far with that. If you disagree with me, just forget it. Who cares? Doesn't matter. I'm not offended. I suppose the lambs were skittish and would not be guided. So the animals are agitated. Little boy's crying. The lambs were skittish, so the animals are agitated. And there's, again, in popular culture, isn't it, in kind of popular folklore, really, there's the idea of animals having extrasensory perception and being aware of the supernatural and being disturbed. So Bronte again leaves it ambiguous, but there seems to have been a supernatural encounter here. Nelly doesn't see it. She's second hand. But what is the matter, my little man? I asked. There's Heathcliff and a woman yonder under to nab, he blubbered, and I dare not pass 'em. I saw nothing, but neither the sheep nor he would go on. Now, there's echoes here with the romantic ideas of Wordsworth, actually, where Wordsworth has ideas that children are closer spiritually to God. So maybe this child's perception, he's able to see Heathcliff and Catherine because he's got a deeper spiritual connection to nature and God, and therefore he can see the ghosts of Heathcliff and Catherine, whereas Nelly can't because she's wrapped up in adult rationality. Then I saw nothing, but neither sheep nor he would go on. I bid him take the road lower down. He probably raised the phantoms from thinking as he traversed the moors alone. So this is the rationality side, isn't it? On the nonsense he had heard his parents and companions repeat. Yet still, I don't like being out in the dark now, and I don't like being left by myself in this grim house. I cannot help it. I shall be glad when they leave it and shift to the Grange. So even though we said earlier, she's got this balance between the irrational and the rational. And so there's the idea of she's saying, I know it's all nonsense, but I still don't like to be out after dark, and I don't like to be in this house on my own. Because there is this haunted feel about it. They're going to the Grange then, I said. So what's going to happen is, as soon as they are married, I should have highlighted this. I'm going to highlight this live. Look at that. It's exciting. Right? So that's really important, actually. So they're going to get married, and that will be on New Year's Day. New Year's Day, symbolic of new beginnings, of new life. And Bronte, at the end of the novel here, is restoring natural balance. You've got Hareton and Catherine, they're good people. They're cousins, but they're a good couple. Catherine is a nicer person now. Hareton is a better person. He's improved. He's educated himself. He can read. He's more of a gentleman as well. And he now owns Wuthering Heights. He owns Fasthouse Grange. He's not like Heathcliff was. And you've got Hareton Earnshaw. The name was above the door of Wuthering Heights all along because Hareton was named after an ancient ancestor. I say ancient, but from about 500 years before or so. Order is restored at the end of the novel. Now, you could take the argument of it's the removal of Heathcliff as an outsider. If you're exploring the theme of the outsider, Heathcliff as an outsider, when he's removed from the equation, natural balance is restored. His arrival... This is a kind of cynical, kind of anti-Heathcliff kind of view of it, really. But the idea of Heathcliff being brought in as an outsider disrupts the natural equilibrium. But you see, that's complicated because really, if that was the case, why does Bronte make it so that Heathcliff has such a strong connection to nature? Why does he have it that Catherine says they have the same soul? Why do they seem to have this transcendent love? So again, I think Bronte's leaving it a bit ambiguous here with it. I don't necessarily think it's not clear cut, is it? It's not clear cut. But you read it, you decide, you listen to the videos, you think of these things. You know, that's what it's designed for. That's why this is classic literature. This is why this is going to outlive all of us. It's just going to carry on. It's going to, because it's a brilliant novel, isn't it? Anyway, I should save that for the end. But anyway, I'm going off on one a bit. Joseph will take care of the house and perhaps a lad to keep him company. Like, worst job in the world. They will live in the kitchen and the rest will be shut up. For the use of such ghosts as choose to inhabit, I observed. No, Mr. Lockwood, said Nelly, shaking her head. I believe the dead are at peace, but it is not right to speak of them with levity. Don't make a joke of it, basically. In that moment, the garden gate swung to. The ramblers were returning. They are afraid of nothing, I grumbled, watching their approach through the window. Together, they would brave Satan and all his legions. So, that's Lockwood actually narrating there. So, this is where the natural balance is restored. Lockwood decides to just make himself scarce, so he doesn't see them. And then should have confirmed Joseph as in opinion of his fellow servants' gay indiscretions had he not fortunately recognised me for a respectable character by the sweet ring of a sovereign at his feet. So this is an ironic account of Joseph was probably about to moan at him, but he gives him a tip. He gives him a sovereign that's worth quite a lot of money as a coin. So Joseph goes away happy then as well. Lockwood's not short of cash, is he? So Lockwood decides to take a walk down by the church. Then he goes and has a look at the graves. The decay had made progress even in 7 months. So this is like nature kind of reclaiming Heathcliff and Catherine, really. Many a window showed black gaps deprived of glass, and slates jutted off here and there beyond the right line of the roof to be gradually worked off in the coming autumn storms. I think Bronte is presented the idea of here like nature is eternal, things that humans make. You know, building like churches and graveyards and things, and houses, and even in some ways, maybe even directly society and culture and rules, you know, laws and stuff. This is all temporary compared to nature. Nature is eternal. And again, it's like that. It's like I said about the novel, outliving us all. Nature goes beyond us. Humans are also part of nature as well. But let's focus on Catherine and Heathcliff because they're really part of nature. I sought and soon discovered the 3 headstones on the slope next to the moor, the middle one grey and half buried in heath. Edgar Linton's only harmonised by the turf and moss creeping up its foot. Heathcliff's still bare. So interesting, like how each one there reflects the personalities of the person buried in it as well. I lingered round them under that benign sky. That's personification. Watch the moths fluttering among the heath and harebells. Listen to the soft wind breathing through the grass. More personification there. And wondered how anyone could ever imagine unquiet slumbers for the sleepers in that quiet earth. So Lockwood ends really with his own kind of recognition of everything being kind of at peace and being restored. And he can't imagine that they would go around as ghosts. But then maybe that's his city dweller ignorance. So that is, as it says here, that is the end of Wuthering Heights. I was going to highlight that, but it's not letting me highlight it. That is the end of Wuthering Heights. There you go. So thank you for listening to all of these. Feel free to listen to them all again. As I say, I've got other videos. If you like this one, I've got my Dracula playlist as well. And in the future, I may have other ones that you might want to look at too. But anyway, I'm going to take a little bit of a rest now. I hope you've enjoyed all of these. Like, comment, subscribe, notification bell, and maybe I will see you in the future. I hope I do. Have a good day or night, whatever you're doing. Thank you. Goodbye.